We are really happy to have Mark Wandersee here this afternoon. He's our final speaker. And I've heard Mark several times. I know the people at Maplewood have heard him, probably some of you others at different events. He's an excellent speaker. Mark is the Executive Director with Elder Care Rights Alliance. Prior to his role as Executive Director, he held the position of Director of Council Services and served on the board of the Elder Care Rights Alliance. You might want to take a chair, Willie. No, I'm not. Mark's involvement in long-term care includes advocacy, direct care, counsel facilitation, legislative activities, stakeholder groups, staff in-services, client coaching, and many, many other things. He's very well known on the topic of culture change and always has a lot to share with us to inspire us to culture change. So I'd like to welcome Mark Wandersee.
Thank you. You guys have a long day? Good training, good information. I can't say enough about emergency preparedness. On my drive over here today, I'll kill a little bit of time while we get my PowerPoint, is Marty the Mazda. It's a car that I've had for some time. I've kind of grown attached to it. And as a result, periodically, he's got to go to the hospital. And today in particular, he decided to get ill again. And so you start thinking about what you believe in. And you start praying. Dear God, please get me to the next stoplight. Get me to the next stoplight, one more half a mile, and I'll be at the church. And sure enough, I got here, and by the time I got here, the idiot lights were all on. The temperature gauge was way beyond H, and it's smoking and steaming. So my emergency preparedness, thank goodness I have my AAA card in my pocket, because that's who I'll be calling after I'm done with the presentation today. So you can never be too prepared for situations. And as you started out your day today, you talked a lot about spirituality and what that means for the work that you all do. And I think of the work that I do, and I do it with passion. I probably wouldn't do it if I didn't have the passion for it. And having taken care of a loved one for 8 years that had Alzheimer's and watching her progress through that disease. And think about that for yourselves in that personal experience. When I was originally asked to speak, you wanted me to talk about culture change. What does culture change look like? What does it do? But more so the importance of culture change as it relates to the individual and that connectedness, or that mind, heart, body, and spirit. And so in your packets, I have the PowerPoint presentation, which I will probably go through at an accelerated rate to be respectful of your time, but to give you some information that you may or may not have already heard. And we'll do a couple of exercises, but hopefully it will kind of pull everything together that you've done throughout the day. Because I think it's interesting that we talk about person-centered care, we talk about person-directed care, and all the different words that we use, individualized care. But really, if anybody is familiar with the term gerotranscendence, has anybody heard that term yet? It's been out there for some time. I think it was back in 1976 that it first started getting coined. But you're going to see some relationship with that whole idea of gerotranscendence and culture change. We were talking about the whole person, and it's that connection of the mind, body, heart, and spirit. And you can't have one without the other. And so in your PowerPoint presentation, you have all of these slides if you want to take some notes. But a lot of them are self-explanatory. But I want to give you a sense of the work that you do is so important. Think for a minute, why do you do the work that you do? Is it for the money? Is it for the hours? What is it for? The relationships or those residents? So spirituality really captures some of that essence of the mind, body, and heart, and specifically that human spirit. It's that connectivity or that connection to the divine spirit. And aging, when we start talking about aging, what does aging really mean? Well, it means to bring about a state fit for use or to maturity. And as the World English Dictionary calls it, is to acquire the physical and mental characteristics of old age. When we talk about spirituality of aging, what does that look like? Has anybody ever say, I feel old today? You might say that at 20, you might say that at 30, you might say that at 40, and by the time we hit 50, we say 50 is the new 30, right? But really, spirituality of aging is when the human spirit is connected to the divine, and whoever that divine is for the individual, in order to bring about a state of fitness or maturity for that individual. And aging is broken up into those 4 components. And those 4 components are the mental, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. Ask yourself the question, are we meeting all of those for the people that we interact with? Whether they be coworkers, whether they be residents, and whether they be families. Because those 4 components are going to vary. I have them nice evenly divided into 4 key parts. But for individuals as they go through life, the mind or the body might be more or less, or the percentage of spirituality or spirit might be more or less. So the mind, body, heart, and spirit, if we look at some of the different psychological graphs that are out there and the different theories, everybody's familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it starts out at the physiological, that survival for water, food, sleep, warmth, exercise. And then as you move up or you transcend, you get to that point of self-actualization, what's really important to you. And that's directly linked with aging, where challenging projects, opportunities for innovation, learning are created at a high level. When you go beyond that, you get to that level of what I call elder transcendence. And what are we doing with those individuals? Well, basic human development theory says magical thinking starts at birth through our childhood years, and then we have that cause and effect thinking, that whole discipline idea, and then abstract logic, what if? And then we break into that area of wisdom or integrity, or the maturity level, that late adulthood, if you will. In Erik Erikson, it's his 8th stage that says that maturity is all about that ego development or that late adulthood. Now brace yourselves if you're heading toward the 60s, because he said back in, I believe it was 1956, late adulthood was 65 to death. Okay? But anyway, it's really talking about that whole stage of integrity and wisdom versus despair and how we feel about that. So the most important event at this stage is coming to accept one's whole life and then reflecting on that life in a positive manner. Now think about some of those residents that you work with, where they're at, and what they want out of life. Okay? So individualism is defined as a social theory that stands for freedom, rights, or independent action of any human being. That pretty much makes sense, right? Carl Jung said human aging is accompanied by transcendence from the inner self to an emphasis to the external self or to the world around them in that need or that desire to contribute to the good of society. And now think about those individuals that you take care of that are dependent on you for their activities of daily living. And are they getting that meaningful need filled to be able to contribute to society? Lars Tornstam, and Wayne talked a lot about the different types of service models that are out there, those natural occurring retirement communities, and then you transcend or you move along that continuum of housing with services and things. Gerotranscendence theory by Lars in Sweden, the Swedish service houses. Any of you familiar with those? Or the cottages and the neighborhoods and such? A lot of this theory is embraced in that whole concept of allowing that individual to age in place. And Ashford, LaCroix, and Lordy said that optimal aging allows the adult to transcend concerns about the deteriorating physical body and materialism of everyday life